Okay, so in today's class, we'll talk about, um, in the first half, we'll talk about quantity theory of money, right? Now, what is quantity theory of money? So that is the very last subtopic of money market, right? Quantity theory of money, right? And after this, we will do quantity theory of money. After this, we'll talk about different schools of economic thought, right? Now, if you remember in one of the previous classes, we did discuss briefly that what's the difference between Keynesian economists approach and what's the difference between classical economists, right? So these are the two major school of economic thoughts, classical and Keynesians, right? But we did not get to write that down. We did not get to, discuss in more detail. So we'll do that in today's class. And then we will also try to start off with another topic that is part of unit 4, which is unemployment, causes of unemployment, and so on, right? And that would today, hopefully, or maximum by tomorrow, will be done with unit 4. And then unit 5, which is the very last unit of A2 economics syllabus, that has just simple concepts about macroeconomic policy. So that discusses about, I'll tell you when we come to that part, but just to give you a quick idea that how are different macroeconomic variables related. I'm talking about unit 5. So in unit 5, it talks about how different macroeconomic variables are related. So for instance, what's the relationship between inflation and unemployment, right? If there is any, right? Similarly, what's the relationship between inflation and balance of payments, right? So what happens is, to a country's balance of payments when inflation is increasing, decreasing, things like that, right? Similarly, what's the relationship between inflation and exchange rate, and so on and so forth. So this is all what the 5th unit is about, right? So it's not any concrete model or not anything, as a model or any description to remember, but it's just basic understanding based on what we have already covered, based on what we already know, right? So that will do towards the end, and hopefully maximum by Saturday we'll be done with the entire syllabus, and then we'll do a lot of past papers practice, right? And I asked you to send me, whenever you have time, just send me the dates of your exams, exact dates of your exams, so that we can better plan and prepare for your papers, right, for your exams. Okay, now let's get started. Now, quantity theory of money. Now, what is quantity theory of money? I'll write down the definition on the notes in a bit, right? But let's first understand quantity theory of money, right? So quantity theory of money is a model, right? Um, is a model that explains why the growth of money supply in an economy should be proportionate to the growth of, should be equal to the growth of goods and services produced. I repeat, quantity theory of money is a model that explains, it's more of a mathematical equation, but we can also call it as a model. So it's a model that explains why the growth of money supply in an economy should be according to the growth of goods and services that are produced in a country, right? Because if that doesn't happen, then there will be some problems in the economy. What are those problems? We'll discuss that right now, right? Is a model that explains why the growth of money supply should be proportional. Money supply in an economy should be proportional, should be proportional to the growth of goods and services in a country. Okay, now think about this. Goods and services in an economy. Okay, now this being said, let's look at what this equation or what this formula is, right? So yesterday I said that this is a very simple equation, right? So it has 4 variables. MV is equals to PT. Now what is this, right? So MV equals PT is all what quantity theory of money is, right? But it proves and it explains a very powerful concept of economics. Okay, think about this. So before we jump to what this equation is showing, obviously we need to define each of these four variables. So there is M, there is V, there is P, and there is T, right? Now M here stands for, it shows, and I'll give you some examples after this, so don't worry. It shows the total money supply of an economy. The total money supply, you can think of it as the total quantity of money available, currency notes available in an economy, right? So total amount of currency notes, right? So back in the day when this was introduced, right, there wasn't much concept of, loans weren't used to be that big proportion of an economy. So this theory is primarily focusing on how much currency notes are available for making, transactions, for buying goods and services. Total amounts of currency notes. So what's the total value of currency notes? Uh, I'll give you some, values, give you an example with values so that you can better understand. But for now, what you need to know, that M stands for money supply, total amount of currency notes that are in circulation, which means that these are printed and this money is being used for making transactions that are in circulation, right? That are in circulation. Okay, now what is V here? So V here is your velocity of circulation. So velocity of circulation basically means that how many times a typical currency note during a certain time period will change hands, will exchange hands, right? So velocity of circulation, think about this. So if I want to capture Pakistan's velocity of circulation, so I will be looking at that one particular note of 500 rupees or 1000 rupees, how many times that exchanges hand during 1 month or during 1 year, right? So if that exchanges hand 5 times a month, right, that means that the velocity of circulation on average is 5 times in this economy in a month, right? Does it make sense? How many times? So what it basically shows is how many times a typical, right, currency note exchanges hands. Is this making sense? Currency note exchanges hand, right? Okay, now that's the second thing. Then coming to the coming to the right hand side of the equation, right? Then the P here represents the average price level, right? So what it actually means, that what is the average price of goods and services that are produced in a country, average price level, right? Average price level, average price of goods and services produced in a country, average price of goods and services produced in a country, right? Okay, and the last of the four variables, which is T, T shows the number of transactions that take place in an economy during certain time period, right? So how many transactions are taking place, right? How many transactions are taking place? Number of transactions, right? So think about this. When you go to shop to buy something, that is one transaction, right? Similarly, when the next day you go to buy something else, that's another transaction. So how many unique transactions are taking place in an economy during certain time period, right? So that's very evident, like self-explanatory, but I'll write it, the definition: number of times people of an economy make transactions with each other. People of a country make transactions with each other, right? Okay, now think about this. Breathe. Now, after defining each of these four terms, now we are coming to the main part of this, right? So quantitative theory of money, I said, is a model, it's a mathematical equation, whatever you want to call it, that explains why the growth of money supply in an economy should be proportional to the growth of goods and services in an economy, right? So if you remember yesterday, we did do a little bit of discussion about this, that I said that the money supply, what's the purpose of money in an economy? Currency notes, right? So money is needed in a country to buy goods and services that are being produced, right? So that's how modern economy works. Now, if money supply is increasing more than the goods and services that it has to buy. So if the money supply, the currency notes available in an economy are increasing faster than the goods and services that are available to buy, then what will that do? That will cause inflation. Why? Because more money will start chasing fewer goods. Sorry, more money will start chasing, more money will start chasing fewer goods, right? So if this left side, money supply, is increasing faster than the available stock of goods and services, then obviously that is expected to result in inflation. And we did study this in our AS economics, and that is known as monetary inflation. That is known as monetary inflation, which happens because of more money available to buy goods and services produced in a country, right? So what will happen? We do know this, and not only from theoretical point of view, we also have real life examples where some countries printed excessive currency notes, and that resulted in insane amounts of very high amounts of inflation, right? Very high rates of inflation, which is known as hyperinflation, right? So that is this very simple and basic concept that quantity theory of money explains, and that is that the left-hand side of the equation, now have a look at this. The left-hand side of the equation, which is M times V, which is basically showing us the money supply. How? I'll tell you. Should be equal to the right-hand side of the equation, which is PT, which shows the real, the real economy. Now think about this. Have a look at this. So this is the formula. MV is equals to PT. So this left side is showing you the stock of money, or the money supply that's available in an economy to buy goods and services, right? And what we are saying here is that this should be equal to the real economy, in the sense that the real transactions that are taking place in economy, worth of transactions. Let's write it down like this, right? So that is how many worth of transactions, value of transactions, the worth of transactions that takes place in an economy during a certain time period, value of transactions. Okay, now have a look at this. Let's assume some values for each of these four variables so that we can better understand. Okay, now let's assume that M in this case, right? Let's say M in this case is equals to $4 million. Let's say there's this any country, right, which has total money supply of $4 million, right? So $4 million worth of currency notes are in circulation, right? So what was M? M is the money supply, total amount of currency notes that are in circulation. So that's what I'm saying, right? That if M is equals to $4 million, that means that $4 million worth of currency notes, right? So obviously some notes are $5 notes, $5 bills, $10 bills, and so on and so forth. But the total amount, the total worth of currency notes that are in circulation that everyone has collectively in a country, that is $4 million. Easy. Okay. Now the velocity of circulation in this country is, let's say, during a certain 1 year, let's say, right, is 5 times. This means that a typical note, $5 note or $10 note, exchanges hand 5 times. So if I had that $5 bill, I went to a shop to buy something like, I don't know, a bottle of milk. And then I gave that bill to the shopkeeper, and the shopkeeper went to purchase some of his groceries, and he paid that bill to that person, and that is how it happened. So this bill exchanged hand 5 times in a year, right? So velocity of circulation is 5 times. How many times a typical currency notes, right? Velocity of circulation is how many times a typical currency note exchanges hand, right? Okay, now then coming to the right hand side of the equation, P. So let's assume that the average price level, that an average product in an economy costs $20. In this economy, an average product, the average price of a typical product in this economy costs $20. And then the last, which is T, the number of transactions that take place during 1 year, let's say that is right 1 million, right? So how many transactions are taking place in this country during 1 year? 1 million, right? Now all we have to do is to just see whether the two equations, so it is more of an identity, mathematical identity, which says that the two sides of the equation should always, the two sides of the equation should always be equal to each other, right? Right? Now think about this. Now when we look at, so we enter 4 million instead of M, and then we multiply it by 5 times that each currency note is exchanging hand, and then on the right hand side, the average price is 20 times 1 million. So we have 5 fours are 20, and this is also 20 times 1 is 20. So the two sides of the equation at the moment are balancing. Okay. Now this being said, we said that the two sides of these equations should always balance. Now what happens? Now quantity theory of money says, right? Quantity theory of money says that during a certain time period, V and T are relatively constant. Now, this is the main part, right? Quantity theory of money says, right, who developed this theory, the researcher, that economist said that V and T are relatively stable during any time period, which means what? That any increase, so if V and T are constant, so if the value of T constant, if constant is one word that's confusing you, what I basically mean, constant basically means that it is stable. The values don't change, right? So the values are stable, right? So it's constant, right? Fixed. So if V and T are relatively constant, then what will that do? That means that any increase in money supply will be directly matched with the increase in price levels. Any increase in money supply will be directly matched because the two sides of the equation have to balance each other, right? So if the left-hand side is increasing, then the right-hand side also has to increase. And since we said that V and T will remain constant, right? Then any increase in M has to be matched with any increase in P. So that is how it explains that if a country is constantly increasing its money supply, which means it's printing more currency notes, then that would result in higher inflation of the country, right? And that is what we have also seen in the past, as I was telling you, right? Preet, is this making sense? Right? So let's write it down over here. So what's the equation? MV is equals to PT, right? So that's the simple equation of quantity theory of money, right? Then we define each one of these. We said money is just a second, right? So M is the money supply, which is the total amount in circulation, right? And V is velocity of circulation, which is the number of times a typical currency note exchanges has, right? Then P is the price level, the average price level, shows of a typical good, right? And T is the number of transactions that takes place in an economy during certain time period. Certain time period, right? We good on this? Okay. Now this being said, let's look at what this shows, right? Okay. Now I said that this theory says during a certain time period, values of P and T are relatively constant, or you can call it fixed, right? The theory says that during a certain time period, the values of P and T are relatively constant or fixed, right? Hence, any increase in money supply is matched by proportional increase in the price level of an economy, right? Does it make sense? Right? So that is how it proves that high, um, like increase in money supply would result in higher prices, right? So, but not always, not always. This is something that you have to understand, right? So if T is increasing, so then the question would be that should a country never print more currency notes? And we do know that over time, countries do print more currency notes. And the answer to that is yes, it can print more currency notes. But when can it print more currency notes? That's what I'm about to explain you. So country would produce more currency notes when M is increasing, to match T. So when M is increasing to match T, then that is justified because in that case, P will not rise. How so? Think about this. So let's go back to the original values we were looking at here, right? So if let's say money supply, current quantity of goods and services produced is how much? 4 million. Current quantity, current amount of goods and, not goods and services, sorry. The current amount of currency notes in circulation is $4 million, right? And currently the number of transactions that takes place in an economy are 1 million. So if this is rising to 2 million, right? So if this increases to, let's say, 2 million, number of transactions now taking place in this country are 2 million, right? Then yes, this country can increase its money supply from $4 million of currency that's in circulation to 8 billion, sorry, not billion, $8 million, right? Because then 8 fives are 40. What would be on the left hand side? Think about this. On the left hand side, you'll get 8 times 5 is 40 million, right? In terms of money supply. And on the right hand side, 20 times 2 would be 20 times 2 would be 40 million, right? Does it make sense? So that is what it says, right? So let me write this down. Does it make sense? However, if the increase in money supply is to match the increase in number of transactions, then was required to print more currency notes, as that would then not result in higher inflation. Is this simple? Are we good on this? Right? So this is what you need to remember, right? That if a country is increasing its money supply due to increase in the number of transactions, which means that now more transactions are taking place. So therefore, obviously, it makes completely sense that to match more number of transactions, obviously there should be more currency notes available, right? Then it's justified for the economy to print more currency notes, otherwise not, right? So that's the bottom line. But if it's only the money supply that you are increasing, you're printing more currency, but number of transactions are the same as they were previously, then that increase in currency notes or money supply would result in higher price level. So that is what you should not do, right? That would result in higher hyperinflation, as we know, right? Right? Okay, are we good on this? So that was the entire idea of quantity theory of money. So with this, it brings us to completion of this mini market in which we talked about, right? All these different things, starting off with the first topic that was about interest rate determination. We talked about two theories, loanable fund theory and liquidity preference theory. We did discuss in detail what each one of these theories says. Then we talked about credit creation. That's the process, how commercial banks issue loans and how that affects money supply. We looked at the entire mechanism, what are the factors that are involved in lending money to businesses and consumers and so on. Then we talked about open market operations, That was about how government affect the money supply of a country through issuing of government bonds, right? So we discussed that, and then in the end we talked about quantity theory of money, right? So if everything is clear, great. Then now we'll jump on to this thing that we could not complete in the last class, right? And then we'll move forward from here. Okay, now different schools of economic thoughts, right? So let me give you some basic idea over here, and then we'll come to the notes and write down all the definitions. Okay, now what is uh, school of economic, right? What was school of thought, basically, as we say, right? So I was telling you in the last class, right, that there are natural sciences and then there are social sciences. Why is this discussion important? I'll quickly recap this for you, right? In natural science, whatever Newton or Einstein, big researchers, right, big scientists, whatever they discovered, right, that was it. That was it, right? So no one could argue, given their theories were correct, no one could argue that, no, they were wrong about it or something of the sort, right? So whenever we are calculating, simple example of that could be if you have to calculate an area of a triangle, I mean, we know the formula, half into base into height, right? So there's no disagreement about that. That is how, natural sciences work, how human body works, how living beings around us operate, blah, 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 right? So biology, physics, chemistry, how electricity works, all these things are part of natural sciences. So wherever one scientist, till whatever extent one scientist have already discovered something, the later scientists build on that knowledge, right? And there's no argument of, there's no room for disagreement or, yeah, different opinions. However, that's not how social sciences work, right? So in social sciences, people can have different opinions, different views, and all these other subjects like law, sociology, economics to a large extent, right? That's all of these things are more of social sciences where there could be a disagreement, right? So, I mean, simple example of that could be, let's say there was someone who did some crime and one country give that person capital punishment, like hang that person. The other country might give that person life in imprisonment for the same crime, right? For the same crime, two countries are dealing with that criminal in a separate manner and giving them different punishments, right? Now that is social science, and people can disagree that which one is right, which one is wrong. I mean, because it's all law, and law is open to discussion and all that, right? Same goes for economics to a large extent. Although although economics has come a long way from being a social science towards more of a natural science. How so? I did tell you that now economics has a lot of mathematical proofs and a lot of mathematical models, which means that whatever is proven mathematically, then that is expected, that is bound to be true, right? So we can prove something mathematically, right? So if I collect 100 years of data for different countries and I show that what happens when there's higher inflation, what happens to unemployment when there's higher inflation, right? And in fact, this is one of the models that we'll discuss in unit 5, which is Phillips curve, that how inflation and unemployment are related. So if you are performing this, if you're making this observation or you are reaching a conclusion by looking at numbers, actual numbers, right? What was the case in different countries? So now we are not making just a theory, we are not just making a philosophy around it out of our own mind. We are looking at actual numbers and actual data to prove that thing to be true or not true, right? So that is what has made economics to come from being just social science to more towards a natural science, right? Does it make sense? Okay. But whenever there is margin for agreement, whenever there would be margin for discussion or margin for, disagreement, then in that case, there could be different schools of thought, right? Some people who believe in one ideology, one type of things, another type of researchers or economists believing in another type of theory or another type of philosophy, right? So this being said, that's what our discussion would be about, different schools of economic thoughts. Now, these two most popular schools of economic thought, right, are Keynes, right? Keynesian economist and classical economist. Now, I was giving you some background of both of these two. Why? Because obviously it's important to understand that why these economists think what they think, right? So until unless you don't know you know, what Keynesian economist, what time were Keynesian economists more popular, or what was happening in the world at that time. Perhaps that's why they made their theories, you know, the way they did, right? Similarly, what was happening during the time of classical economists, and that will help you understand that why they made the theory that the one that they did, right? So it's important to understand and get to know the background for each of these two schools of economic thoughts, right? So on one hand side, you have classical economists, and on the other hand side, you have Keynesian economists, right? Keynes, right? Okay, now think about this. Keynesian economists became popular during 1930s, and this was this time you might have heard the word Great Depression, right? So after, I think it was after World War One, that World War One, yeah, after World War One, after all the destruction that took place in the world, economies were recovering, production was not taking place as usual, every economic activity was disrupted, right? Apart from perhaps the production of weapons and so on and so forth, right? So now in this time, Keynesian economists started becoming popular, right? 1930s, right? Great Depression. Now in this time, what Keynesian economists observed and what they saw, that the role of government in an economy is very crucial. That's what they thought, right? So they thought that the role of government in an economy is very crucial because government is obviously a regulatory body. Government makes rules and policies and all that thing. So Keynesian economists believe that government role should be more. There should be more of government's role even in the economic activity of a country, right? So there should be more things like more subsidies, more regulatory framework, more government investment in different projects, education, healthcare, right? So they advocate for more government involvement and more government um, role in economic activities, like providing basic public goods, but apart from public goods, also providing merit goods, education, healthcare, and making sure that people have more equal incomes and things like that, right? That's what Keynesian economists believe in. I'll write down all of this in the notes in a bit, but for now, just focus on what I'm saying. Okay. On the other hand, classical economists became, I don't know exactly what was the time, but it was post 1950s, right? So post 1950s, when things started becoming, when research and development, and all these things, right? When the world was stable and humans were obviously researching about all these other disciplines and everything, right? That is when mathematics and other natural sciences were also, getting more discoveries and all that thing. So that time, mathematical concepts were also adopted in economics, right? So mathematical concepts and mathematical frameworks also started becoming more popular in the study of economics. And that is when economists started looking at the data, actual data, and things like that, to see whether a certain economic theory or a certain economic thought actually holds true or not with data, right? So that is why whenever we study, even when we start off with economics, we do tell economic students that there would be some part of economics that deals with those are positive statements, or as we say, positive economics, and there would be some part of economics that is normative economics, or that relates with opinions, right? So positive and normative economics, right? So these are two important things that we introduce students of economics very early on, because we do know that not all of economics is about opinions. Obviously, not all of economics is about opinions, and similarly, not all of economics is about facts and facts and objective. Like facts are objective, there's no uh, margin for disagreement, right? So that is why we tell them that these could be two things that can exist, and some of it is opinion and some of it is factual, right? Okay. Now, coming back, so classical started incorporating more mathematical concepts, more mathematical frameworks, and whatever they developed after that, after Keynesian economists, that was more founded, that was more grounded in mathematical, findings. Okay, now this being said, so let's go back, and that is what you need to know as far as your A2 economics syllabus is concerned, right? So let me write this down. During 1930s, time of Great Depression, one, four, one, zero, that government should take more active role in functioning of an economy, like providing public goods. Government should also have more proactive approach towards provision. You know what provision is: supply. So provision of merit goods like education, healthcare, and making sure, um, and also maintaining a fair regulatory regulatory framework. Okay, now think about this. So this is a little bit of description, but let's read this together. So Keynesian economists became popular during 1930s, right? The time of Great Depression after World War One, and therefore what they observed was that the government should take more active role in functioning of an economy. Like apart from providing public goods, the government should also have more proactive approach towards provision of merit goods like education and healthcare, and also in terms of maintaining a fair regulatory framework, right? So long story short, Keynesian economists really advocate, they really support more government intervention and more government involvement in an economy, which is not the case with classical economists, right? Classical economists, on the other hand, right, uh, develop based on practical concepts, and they try to prove different economic theories on the basis of their data, right? Think about this. So classical economists, on the other hand, develop theories based on, so this is more contemporary. Contemporary means recent, right? Contemporary means recent. Contemporary school of thought, right? So what they do here is, right, classical economists, the more contemporary school of thought, on the other hand, develops theories based on mathematical concepts, and they tried, right? And they try to prove different economic theories on the basis of data, right? Also, classical economists do not uh, advocate for greater intervention in an economy. Instead, or let's simply write this down as, Also, classical economists right, disapprove greater intervention in an economy. They uh, believe that greater government intervention will result in inefficiencies, and therefore the government should restrict its activities just to provision of basic public goods. Does this help? Breathe, right? Does it make sense? Okay, now let's read this together. So classical economists, the more contemporary school of thought, on the other hand, developed theories based on mathematical concepts, and they try to prove different economic theories on the basis of data, right? Obviously, they need to see whether any theory is even making sense, even that is validated. Could that theory be even validated through the use of data or not? That's what they do, right? Also, very much opposite to what Keynesian economists do, that they support government intervention. In fact, they do believe that greater government intervention is fundamental or crucial for the success of an economy. They, on the other hand, classical economists believe the very opposite. Classical economists disapprove of greater government intervention, right? Greater government intervention, and they believe that greater government intervention role would result in inefficiency, and therefore the government should restrict its activity just to provision of basic public goods, right? Because we know public goods are not provided by the private sector, so that would obviously be done by the government. Okay, now this being said, now we are left with very last concept of very last topic of unit 4 of macroeconomics of A2, right? That is unemployment. So in this topic, what we'll talk about is that obviously, first of all, what is unemployment? We'll define unemployment and all these things, and then we'll discuss causes of unemployment, like what actually causes unemployment, and how can government um, control that, right? Easy. Okay, now let's have a look at this. So what is unemployment, right? So it's not something new to us. Even if we don't study economics, unemployment is one word that we hear oftentimes, and right, it's a very commonly used and commonly understood word, right? So unemployment refers to people who are willing and are looking for work and are, let's write one more word, looking for work but okay, think about this. Who are unemployed? Unemployed are obviously people. Unemployment or unemployed refers to people who are willing. So that's the first criteria, right? Now let me bold this. Who are willing and able. I mean, what ability means that they are mentally stable, they're physically fine, right? They don't have any, they're not mentally or physically challenged, right? They're perfectly fine and are actively looking for work, right? So they're, I mean, this is kind of explaining willingness, right? And are actively looking for work but could not find any, right? Okay, now, in fact, let's remove this, right? Now think about this. Unemployed refers to people who are eligible. Now, what does eligible means? Eligible means that they're even, eligibility means that they are allowed, they're eligible, right? So there is no such thing that stops them. So think about it. If someone below the age of 18 is looking for work, would that person be defined as unemployed? No, right? Why? Because that person is not eligible for work, right? He or she is a minor, right? So they can't work. So unemployed refers to people who are eligible, meaning they are capable, they are allowed as per the law, as per whatever restrictions there could be, right? They're allowed by law to work. They are able to work, like they're mentally and physically not challenged. They are normal, human, right? Fine. And they're actively looking for work. So they're also willing, kind of actively looking for work, meaning they're willing to work, right? But they still could not find work. That those are the people who are known as unemployed. Now, to understand exactly that what population in a country is unemployed, that's what we have to do, right? So have a look at this. Unemployment would be defined like this, right? So unemployment, we have already looked at the definition, right? Now, to understand who are the people unemployed, we will look at the population structure of a country, right? Because that will help you better understand that which group of population is basically defined as unemployed. Population structure, right? Now, what we'll do is that we will divide the entire population of a country in different groups, and then we'll see that what each of those groups show and so on and so forth, right? So population structure. Okay. Now it's a big diagram, so I can make it over here, right? So if this is the entire population of a country, right? So we are starting from the top and then we are dividing the population in different groups, right? So first of all, you'll divide the population of a country in three categories. What are these three categories? I'll explain you. I'll show you, right? Okay. Now the first one is minors. So minors or below the age of 18, right? In most countries, minors are below the age of 18, right? So how many people are below the age of 18 in a country? Those all would be minors, right? Okay. Then you have working age population. Now, working age population is basically the people who are eligible to work. Working age population who are eligible, because um, we know that minors cannot work, they're not allowed to, right? Working age population. Then you have the third group in which we divide the country's population is senior citizens, or you can say, retired individuals, right? Not all of them might be retired, but senior citizen, retired individuals, right? Okay. Now, in different countries, the definition of these two categories might be different, right? So normally it's 18 to 60, sorry, it's 18 to 60 years of age. That's defined as working age population. These are all the people who are eligible to work, right? And obviously anyone above 60 years would be defined as senior citizen, which means that, I mean, technically they can work, and in modern, modern economic systems, we do see a lot of people above the age of 60 who are working, right? But I mean, as per the definition of economics, they would not be defined as unemployed. They would not be defined as unemployed, right? Okay. Now, first of all, let's look at this one more time. So population has been divided into three groups, three categories: minors who are below the age of 18, working age population who are between the ages of 18 to 60, and senior citizens or retired individuals, anyone above the age of 60. Okay. Now, within working age population, there will be two further, groups. So one is, now this is very important. So now one of these would be, part of labor force, right? Within working age population, one group would be part of labor force, not labor force, and the other one would be not part of labor force, or you can simply say not part of labor force. Okay. Now, what is this distinction? Now, let me give you an example. At what age will you go to college, like university or college, right? After your high school, after your high school, right? You will already be 18 or 19, right? So when you complete your A levels, you will already be 18 or 19. Now, you are eligible to work, but since higher education starts at the age of 18 to 19, so these people are in university, in colleges, right? Undertaking education full time, right? So they are undertaking education full time, right? So they're not looking for work. If that's the case, then you are not part of labor force, right? So anyone who doesn't want to seek work, anyone who is a full-time student and that person doesn't seek work, so that person is a student, they're not looking for work. So that's what's the distinction between labor force and not in labor force. So labor force are the people who are willing to work, right? Willing to work. So, and not the part of labor force are the people who are not willing to work, right? Easy, right? Is it making sense? Okay, now this being said, right? So I was telling you that anyone who is above the age of 18, but they don't want to work, either themselves, they don't want to. I mean, there are some people, right, who don't want to work, or perhaps they are students, or some people are homemakers, they just stay at home, they take care of home, blah, 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 whatever. But if someone is not willing to work for whatever XYZ reason, they're not part of the labor force. Okay. Now, within labor force, there will be two further categories. Now, within labor force, there will be two further categories, and those would be of people who are employed. And think about this, labor force comprised of all people who are willing to work, but not all of these people find jobs, right? So these would be employed. Just give me a second, please. Just give me a second. Okay, so think about it. So labor force comprises of two categories, employed and unemployed, right? So employed obviously are the people who are able to find jobs, and unemployed are the ones who are unable to find jobs, right? Okay, now this is what the population structure is, right? So you could see that we have divided the entire population. First of all, we divided in three categories: minors who are below the age of 18, then you have working age population who are between the ages of 18 to 60, then you have senior citizens who are above the age of 60, then within working age population, right, you have two further categories: labor force who are willing to work, not in labor force who don't want to work for whatever reasons as we discussed, and then within labor force, those are the people, these are the people who are able to find jobs, and unemployed are the people who could not find jobs. So they are still looking for work. So that's how you divide the population structure of an economy, right? Okay, now this being said, Preet, can we continue from here in tomorrow's class, right? And if we can do the class a little earlier tomorrow only, right? Like around 5. Would that work for you? 5 Pakistani. Perfect. So I'll confirm you tomorrow once again, right? Good. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye.